everybody, welcome. We're doing the next couple weeks a Q&A town hall focused on each county. So tonight is kind of, our first one. So we thought we'd start with Snyder and just, see how it goes, and invited some people. And again, if you're still one of the people that signed up and you still want to come on, we can still let you on as this is going. So give it another couple minutes here as people come on, and then we'll get started. So again, it's Saturday, August 8th at 7:33, and we'll get this started in a second here. And if you have questions, and you're not in the meeting here in the Zoom, you can, put them in the chat and we will monitor that as best we can. But if you're watching and you would like to get in this meeting, just let us know and we'll send you the information. All right. Okay, there comes Jeff. So we have some more people that are joining here as we start. As again, if you see this and you want to hop on or have a question, just post them, in the comments. If you want to join the Zoom, you are welcome. So you can be here to ask me a question one-on-one. Does anybody that's here right now want to start off a question or comment or anything to begin?
I believe we had a few submitted when people registered. Do you want to start with?
Yeah, we could start with that.
Okay, so Bob Gatsky, who's joining us, asked about prescription drug costs. Bob, would you like to ask your question? Oh, I think you're muted.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that Michelle is aware of a problem that affects people on Medicare with their prescription drug plans, because very often, your copay is higher, and sometimes very much higher than you'd pay if you just walked into Weiss Markets or Walmart. And I mentioned in a note to Kristen before that there's a bill, if I remember correctly, 943, that Republicans are trying to sell as a way to ensure lower drug prices, but in fact it doesn't ensure anything. It just prevents the, what are they called? Prescription drug plan managers, the companies that sell, the insurance companies, from putting gag clauses into the contracts that they have with pharmacies. So it does stop that, but it sure doesn't ensure that the pharmacist is going to tell you that there's a cheaper way to buy the drug.
Oh, so they're not going to be able to, it still doesn't allow the pharmacist to say there's a cheaper way for the person purchasing to buy that medication, is what you're saying.
It doesn't require the pharmacist to say that.
Oh, okay.
It prevents the insurance company from putting a gag clause in the contract.
Okay, but they still don't have to pass on that information.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, prescription drug costs that is a huge problem plaguing Pennsylvania and the entire United States. We have a problem right now where I think too many pharmaceutical companies can make large donations to politicians to get them to write bills like this that can appear like they're offering more transparency, which this seems to do. But if it's not getting that information directly to the consumer, then it doesn't basically do any good, but they can say they passed a bill that was more transparent, and that's what they're going to do.
Exactly. They want to be able to say someday, well, we did something and it was a good first step, and okay, maybe it didn't go quite far enough and we should review it.
Yes, exactly.
They'll still try to take credit for doing something.
Yeah. And I mean, I forget what company it was, but when the pandemic started, they immediately, was it Lilly? I don't know. Somebody immediately had come out and decreased the price to help the consumer. I think it was diabetic medicine, or it might have been EpiPens. And my thought process was, if you could do that already, why weren't you doing that? Right? Like, we shouldn't be putting such a burden on people that are sick, and that's what ends up happening. And then it forces doctors to not be able to sometimes prescribe the medication they need because they know it's a financial burden to that person that needs that medication. I mean, I used to sit in a hospital and get IV fluid treatment for my medical condition for a couple of years. I sat by people that had Crohn's. I sat by people that had colitis. I sat by people that had MS. And their Remicade monthly bill was insane. I mean, thousands of dollars. And there was one woman who had come in, and she had very serious immune issues. And I remember sitting by her, and we got to be close friends. You know, you're sitting there with hours by somebody, you get talking, and you see that person on a regular basis, you get to know them. And I'll just never forget, the billing department walked in and said, your insurance has stopped paying for this. And this was a woman that was employed at a school district. She had good insurance. This shouldn't have happened to her. And they said, they've stopped paying the last couple months. And they said, you owe us in the 5 figures. I believe it was close to $25,000. That woman never came back. And to this day, I've always wondered, is she still alive? She never came back. And I think that that's something that I'm hearing from other physicians say. These financial burdens are actually, people are not going to their return visits like they used to. Like, this stuff is just, and then what does that do? That makes people's condition get worse. They get sicker. And then they get to the point where they're so sick that they finally do have to go back to the doctor, and it's to a point where it's too late, or the treatment's going to be even more money. Like, my uncle had ulcerative colitis, and his medical bills added up. He didn't get the treatment he needed. It turned into cancer, Mr. Gatsky, and he died in his early 50s. Wow. And it was from drinking water from a polluted well that the coal company got into the groundwater, and my uncle paid the ultimate price, right? And it wasn't his fault. And we shouldn't be putting sick people in that type of position. And we shouldn't be putting, I had a doctor on for one of my first town halls, Dr. Lamar Foley. I forget, he's actually running for office. I forget what district it is. And he was saying that the amount of paperwork and stuff that his office has to do to try to get medications covered and on all this bureaucracy prevents him from being the doctor and treatments that he wants to do for his patients. And that was really sad to hear. I mean, that's where we are, that doctors are now at a point where they feel guilty, right? Because they can't get the treatment that the patient needs because of fighting health insurance or people aren't getting refills of medications and they're hoarding their medication and then getting sick. I mean, I've heard story after story. I believe there was a young gentleman in this area that was rationing his insulin and ended up in a coma because he couldn't afford to get it filled all the time. And that's horrifying. And again, these issues for me, it's like, these aren't red or blue issues, right? These are issues affecting Pennsylvanians. These are issues affecting Americans all over the country. These shouldn't be red and blue issues. They should be issues. These are human issues. These are people issues. This is what people are dealing with right now. And because of the COVID pandemic, I think this stuff has been highlighted a little bit more, and people might be paying a little bit more attention to it. But I'm deathly afraid with all what the stuff that I'm seeing, that 40 to 60% of small businesses might be going under in the next year. And what's that going to do? That's going to force people off their employee health insurance. These people are going to have no health insurance, and then people are really not going to be having their medical treatment, right? This is what's going to happen here is going to spiral. It's going to have a web of issues that are going to happen, right? So I don't know how much more people can take. I mean, just a little bit of personal history for me. I needed a surgery in, I think it was around 2001-ish. The doctors had started saying, I think she needs a surgery. We had to go through the whole request, you know, and it took a couple years, denial. And basically I had to have it at the Cleveland Clinic, and the Cleveland Clinic said, you know what you should do? Declare yourself an independent and go on Medicaid. And that's what I had to do to have my procedure done. I had to declare myself an independent and go on Medicaid to get a procedure done that a number of doctors had signed off that she needed. It wasn't just one doctor. It was a couple of my family doctors, my specialists. They had all written letters. She needs a surgery. She needs the surgery. We don't know what else to do. And, you know, it was hard for my parents, I think. I mean, my dad's on here, but like when you're paying into that health insurance and it's not covering your child, you know, you feel guilty about it, right? Like that's the other thing, that we're not thinking about what it's doing to the families who are hardworking people that are paying into this insurance week after week, only to have that denial come, right? That's what some of the problems are here. And at some point, this stuff has to be dealt with. We need to be more proactive in our healthcare. We need to be working to get people healthier in this country. I mean, and especially in this Commonwealth. I mean, our asthma, I think, is like in the top 3 in the state nationally. We are for asthma. Childhood cancers are creeping up in this state.
Oh, I get really stuffy nose whenever I snuff.
And so it's getting, the people are starting to pay the price of the stuff that's going on in Pennsylvania, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop. And I agree with you. Kristen sent me a little bit of information. I'm going to dig into to read that bill more, but that was what the first thing that I noticed. It looked like, again, it's a small little step, but it doesn't do enough to ensure that the actual patient is getting that information. And that's a problem. Yeah. Well, thank you. Do you have anybody else have any more questions here, or?
Amber Bueller is also with us, and Amber submitted 2 issues that she really cares about: mental health and education. So Amber, was there something specifically that you wanted to ask about those subjects?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I was just more curious about what the sort of issues are specifically in your area, and how, you know, you plan on going about it, because it's a big issue, you know, statewide. And I know you're representing a specific area within Pennsylvania, but senators have real impact, you know, sort of en masse to the state. So I'd love to know a little bit more about sort of your thinking around mental health issues, specifically, I guess, to kids, but more as a whole, and then sort of how that all sort of ties in or dovetails in with education.
So, I mean, I'm a mother of a 9-year-old little boy. I think the mental health issue is an issue that the Commonwealth, and if not the country, has been ignoring for a long time. We do not properly fund and take care of these programs that are needed to offer people access to mental health care. And then, unfortunately, I think we shame people that have mental health issues, and people don't seek the treatment. And again, that ties back to the whole healthcare issues to begin on a greater picture. I do think that, you know, with everything that's going on with COVID and finances and jobs and everything, I think that this is going to be a very tough year for people mentally. I don't, even if you're not somebody that struggles with mental health issues, which I have seen firsthand in my family. I have some uncles that have suffered with mental health issues, so I've seen firsthand how that's, my dad's smirking. I've seen firsthand how that's can affect a family, and it can be devastating. And it's not an issue that needs to be taken lightly. And unfortunately, what is happening is organizations that are not equipped to handle people with mental health issues are forced to handle these issues because we're not properly funding the programs that need to take care of them, right? And you can see that in schooling. I personally have no problem with there being some sort of security officer at a school. I think with the way things are now, somebody checking who is coming in and out of that school needs to happen. But I don't think those people should be dealing anything with child issues or any type of mental health issues with a child. They should not be involved. We need to make sure that we have better student to guidance counselor ratios, because that's not happening in a lot of school districts. We need more access to people. We need access so that people can get these treatments and they're affordable and they're not a burden. Because again, I don't think people initially go to this stuff and then it gets to be such a financial burden that people stop going. And again, a lot of, if you go to a lot of psychiatrists or psychologists, that's a lot of out of pocket. Some insurances won't even pay for it, right? So this is another issue. A lot of times it has to come right out of your wallet. So I do think this is an issue that needs to be seriously addressed and seriously looked at, and it has not been getting attention. It's one of those things that we don't want to talk about, I think, in society, but we need to have these conversations. There has to be a better response. There has to be a better action out of our legislature on how to properly fund access to mental health care. And that's not happening. And that's not happening in most things, right? Like our public school funding in general right now is ranked 46th in the entire nation. That is embarrassing, especially for a lot of people when they look and see how much property tax they're paying. And then you look and see that your school district is ranked 40, your funding from the state is ranked 46, and you're like, why? We're paying a ton of money. Where's that going? If this stuff doesn't get remedied and we don't start making sure that we're getting that tax dollars to the place it's supposed to go, stuff is going to continue to get out of whack. I mean, looking at we're in billions out of whack in our budget. And unfortunately, I think it's our public programs that then get to be cut. I just found out that the flat funding, because of COVID, they quick threw a flat funding of our budget for the next, I think it's 5 or 6 months. Is that right, Kristen? Is it 5? It's only a couple months, but they did the school districts. I believe school is a year, but the flat funding is already having a negative effect. I just found out that the group that I apply to every year to get a grant to help run the musical program at the place I work with at every summer isn't sure now they're going to be able to have that money because of flat funding. They don't think it's going to be there. So now our children are once again paying the price that our legislature is not properly funding these programs that we desperately need, because that program that Kelly Filer runs at the rec, this summer camp, it is attended by a lot of lower income and families that are on free or reduced lunches. And that program, and that especially that musical program, a lot of kids don't have access to that in the summer. And I volunteer and don't get paid. I do that because I think kids should have access to the arts. And those kids are so, for the last 2 years that we started doing this, we do that musical program every summer. We couldn't do it this summer, unfortunately, because of COVID. But the last 2 years, those kids were so proud of themselves when the community would come for the night of that show. And now hearing that we might not be able to apply for that grant next year because of this flat funding, these kids are going to be devastated.
Yeah. I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I'm a mom. I see it. Like, and again, I think most people understand why we had to do the lockdown. I think most people get that, right? But my kid was devastated that he couldn't go to school. He loved his teacher this year. If you're watching Miss Nicola, like that was his life, right? He loved his teacher. And again, we're watching an issue where I see both sides. And it's hard for me because I see a lot of struggling families right now that are like, I can't take off work to homeschool my kid. And I agree, school shouldn't be daycare. It shouldn't be babysitting. But for a lot of working families, they can't afford any other option, right? But then I see the other side where the teachers are like, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I'm not sure, and especially in rural, because I know a lot of families that those kids are raised by the grandparents who are very vulnerable to COVID. So even though those kids might not show any symptoms, they could be carers. They could take that home to grandma and grandpa. And that's a disastrous situation that could happen too. That I don't think it's talked about enough. But again, rural issues don't typically get talked about enough. That's the problem. So I see both sides of this, right? Like it's tough. This is all tough. And again, I think we're asking a lot of our kids, and they've been troopers. I'm surprised how well my kids have been taking wearing a mask to stuff. He's not usually that keen on that kind of thing, but he understood that there's something going on and he has to do it. I think kids are resilient. I love working them. I was a youth leader. This is one of the reasons I decided to run for office, because I worked with these kids constantly. And the one day I just looked at them and they're all playing together at the church youth group. And I just said to myself, who is thinking about these kids down in Harrisburg and their future and their families and their grandparents and their friends? Because I don't see it happening. But I'll tell you what, they sure do. They love to write bills that give tax breaks to their donors, which they made sure they did right before they left session to go campaigning. That was the last thing they did. They made sure they gave their donors a tax break. But meanwhile, the rest of us are sitting here freaking out and saying, what's going to happen when that moratorium on evictions is gone? What's going to happen when our unemployment, special unemployment, is gone? We still never addressed all the PPE we need for our frontline workers. And again, it's fallen on our small businesses, which have been troopers through this, but nobody's getting the help they need, except the industry that's bankrolling Harrisburg. I think it's unacceptable. And I think that we have to have a government that gets back to the people, right? I am a Democrat, but I believe in a government that's of, by, for the people. That is what our founders made. That is what they wanted. That is the point of this. They wanted average people to run. And I think average people are scared to run because we have to fundraise a ton of money and we have to go up against a machine. And it favors incumbency, believe me. I think Kristen and I have found, one of the things that we have found utterly shocking about all of this is how much this is set up to favor incumbency. And I just don't think that that's how democracy is supposed to work. Does anybody else have any questions?
Lana Golden asked about the environment. I'm sure that's that.
Lena, you know that's something that could take me in. That could be the whole town hall. So really quick about my personal story. I touched on it a little bit. So my grandmother would always take me for walks in the woods. She was a big conservationist. She loved to teach me about bugs. I mean, she could find a walking stick on a branch like that, and it just amazed me as a child. I thought it was like magic. It was amazing. And she could find tea berries and everywhere and taught me, which berries are okay to eat, which berries are not okay to eat. And we would spend hours in the woods. And I loved it. And it's something that I have, two grandmothers. One was the ones that was very environmental. My other grandmother was the Hollywood glamour. So I had both sides of it. It was just, I was very lucky. But my grandmother, the one time she took me to the top of the hill. And I just remember there was woods. trees, 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 trees. You get to the top of the hill and there was nothing. There was nothing except water. Just, I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I'll never get this image out of my head. And I turned to her and asked what it was, and she said, it's death. Now, you can imagine when you're a child, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, that was horrifying, Grandma. But that water at their house, when you turned on the faucets, it stung your nose. It reeked of sulfur that bad. And I remember growing up, we were told you cannot drink the water at Grandma and Grandpa's. You have to drink the Tulpehocken that the coal company paid to have delivered to their house. You were allowed to wash your hands, you were allowed to bathe in it, but you could not drink it or cook with it or anything like that. So we grew up knowing that. And, my grandfather got cancer, colon cancer. As I said before, my uncle got ulcerative colitis, didn't get proper treatment and medical bills. We didn't have GoFundMes back then. If we had a GoFundMe, and again, going back to one bigger point, many rural people have a lot of pride. Asking family and friends for money is a hard thing to do for a lot of people in rural PA. So he didn't really tell anybody this was going on. So his disease progressed, and he ended up dying in his early 50s. So, our family was devastated. My grandfather, he ended up having bowel resection surgery, and he did live into his early 90s, but we had to deal with him constantly having to have surgery to fight his cancer. My grandmother, after my grandfather died, she lived a little bit longer. She ended up getting cancer then right at the end before she died. But when she finally passed away and my family went to put that land up for sale, the coal company comes in and says, nobody can ever live here again. We're going to buy this land. They tore that house down. It sits empty on App Road right here in Snyder County. And now my family and my dad, we're all sitting here like, how polluted was that land that now you're not even telling anybody can ever live there again? And I talked to the farmer that lives right near it, and he said, we're burning through water filtration systems. That's how polluted this water still is. And he knew my family because their family was dealing with it, my family was dealing with this. He's scared that even have his kids near it. He can't even have as many animals on that land as he used to because he's petrified. And he said there's literally black helicopters that circle this ash pit that's still there, they're hanging out the side of it with radar. He goes, I don't know what they're collecting data from. It's all fenced up now. Like when I was young, you could get pretty close to it. Now there's a big fence around it. You can't even get near it. They were supposed to run the bypass from it. They had to rewrite the bypass because that land is so unstable. They need to remedy it. And I've brought this up a million times. There's no reason why DEP or a legislature are not remedying this, because these are all over central Pennsylvania, these unlined coal ash pits. And again, I firmly wonder, is there a direct relationship between these coal ash pits and how much chronic disease we have in central Pennsylvania? Because that's something that does not get talked about either. How many GI issues we have in central Pennsylvania. So, I mean, I've seen firsthand like what greed and what misinformation does to average hardworking people. And my grandparents were they didn't believe in suing anybody. That's not who they were. And they, we just believed that, the company came in and said, drink this water, we'll pay for your Tulpehocken drinking water, and that's it. So for the environment, I mean, these are backyard issues. This farmer too, he was talking about how they had to take some of his land to run the one fracking pipe to go into the new natural gas plant here in Shamokin Dam. And his soil is it's rated A1 rank is what he told me, which is like the best in the world. And he looked at me and he said, if you mess with that soil, it's gone. Like you touch it, you can't get it back. So when they were building that pipeline through there, he went out to them and he told the industry, please, please take that topsoil, set it aside on a pile so we can put it back on, because I cannot lose this. This is my livelihood. This is providing food for this community. And he said, go look out there. Look at those bare patches. They did not listen to me, and I can never get that land back. So I really have a problem when our state rep and our state senator come in downtown Selinsgrove and start telling me how much they care about farmers. When this stuff is happening, our farmers are losing land to eminent domain constantly in central Pennsylvania, and they're doing nothing about it. Suicide is out through the roof in farmers, especially in the dairy industry. They're not doing anything about it. And I believe in local sustainable farming. I think that is a key that could save the farming industry. I mean, this farmer that I talked to, he had 3 young children, and he looked at me and said, I don't know if I want to put this burden on them when I die. I don't know if I want any of them to take over farming because it's such stress. That's not how we treat hardworking people. That's not how we should be treating the people that make our food, that grow our food. And again, the farm bill they passed a few years ago, great, that was great, but it's not addressing the stuff that's happening right now. And we could be coming up with better solutions to work with school districts to help invest in our local farms. If the food was coming fresh from a local farmer, local farmers that work together, think how great that would be for our children if they were eating fresher food that was local. It's a win-win situation. Again, this stuff is not, it could be figured out and everybody could come away. Our kids would be healthier. There's been a lot of science that shows when kids eat better, they're more behaved, they think better in school, they're more attention. It would save the farmers. They'd have investment. They'd have a sustainable business. But our legislature is too busy down in Harrisburg working for their donors. And I cannot stress that enough. I never really paid attention until I decided to run for office. And I would sit the last couple months and just watch what's going on in the Senate. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And what's sad is the Democrats are often trying, but they don't have enough power to get anything done. And there was some issues, like I know the Republicans made a big deal about SB 613 and that kind of thing. And the Democrats actually were willing to pass it if they passed the PPE and hazard pay amendments that they wanted. So again, we're hearing one narrative and we're not seeing what's actually going on down there, right? That's the issue. They come back to their area and they say everything's so partisan, blah, 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 blah. But they're not actually paying attention to what's going on down there. So at the minimum, I can't stand here and promise you that if I got elected, I could flip a switch and make everything better. But I can promise you that I would go down there and advocate for everything that rural people need and try. And I could try and I could be that voice and say, and be honest with you all and come back and say, that's a disaster. Everybody's playing games, and we're seeing that now in election year. Both sides are playing games. I'm not going to say that the Democrats aren't necessarily always, they're not playing games right now. I see both sides doing it sometimes. But everybody just wants to be so partisan and stuck. And then meanwhile, our farmers, our children, our working families, they're the ones paying the price. So Elena, I am again, like, you know, I could go on a rant more about the environment, but again, I majored in environmental science. I have a BS in environmental science at Susquehanna University. If there's somebody that could advocate for better environmental regulation and policies that need to be placed in Pennsylvania, it's me. What's up, Kristen?
So Jay Grandis also asked another question about healthcare, but this is more specifically about healthcare reform. So he was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your position on healthcare reform and what you think can be done at the state level.
So that's a loaded question, right? So it's hard. I believe what they're working on is there's a group that's trying to work on a bill that could allow states to pass more of a single payer type system at the state level. That's what would need to happen before you could do something like that. I mean, the stuff that I've been through and stuff, the healthcare system absolutely needs major reform, right? It is a system that runs on profiting off of sick people. And I don't think that's the way it should be. I think when you're sick and your family sees you sick, and for me, when I was throwing up all day and your parents are, you know, trying to be brave and strong while you do that, the last thing you want to worry about is a medical bill that makes you feel guilty as a child that your parents have to pay. And that's what is happening in this country and in this state. And I don't think it gets talked, the emotional burden that this stuff does to people. We talk about the financial burden, but we're not talking about what it emotionally does to families that are already dealing with somebody that is extremely ill. And I know Kristen, she's dealt with medical issues and she's seen a lot of flaws going on too. And that's one reason we decided to do this, because somebody has to be advocating for the people that they're falling through the cracks in the system, just like my uncle. Because we all know a lot of people in central Pennsylvania that have a GoFundMe. This is a sad reality that how many times on Facebook do you see a friend of yours on Facebook posting, my friend has medical debt, can you please donate to their GoFundMe? Most of the time, these people actually have health insurance. And that's what even is extremely sad. Most of the time, these people actually have health insurance, and the health insurance they're paying into is not paying. So they have to make a GoFundMe. And again, it's all related, right? Like if we invested in and advocated and taught our kids and got healthier food in schools, stuff, you could make the whole system based on keeping people healthy instead of profiting off of them being sick, right? And that's what's going on. And I don't see really anybody in the legislature right now except a core group of people that would really hardcore want to work on some healthcare reform. It's not going to get anywhere with the way the majority is right now. And it's like what Mr. Bob Gatsky said, they're going to put out these little bills that are a little positive, but in reality, they're not necessarily doing what they want.
Okay, do we want to open the floor up? Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask? You can just feel free to take yourself off mute and ask your question.
I see Jeff here. Okay, go ahead, Robert.
Hey, Michelle, I got a good question for you. You know, I'm all about government transparency, and I'm pretty sure you are too. Do you think that it would be more beneficial for the public if our legislators were, able to be right to know requested, just like local leaders are? Right now, they have exemptions. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think Kristen has put in a right to know. We're on Mr. Gordner's per diem spending, because I'm curious what he's spending his per diems on. Whether that'll be answered, we'll find out. I completely agree with you. The one thing that I have noticed, Robert, and I know you're a Millheim Borough Council person. The one thing that I have noticed in the legislature from the majority party, the GOP, that loves to advocate and say they're for small government, what I have noticed over the last couple of years in the amendments and bills that are passed is seriously taking power from small government. And that is extremely concerning to me. Corman stuck an amendment recently that I still don't know what their game is on that, but it's trying to decrease the amount of elected people on borough councils. I don't think this gets talked about enough, and it's horrifying. That should scare us. And those little amendments that said you'll be sued if your municipality tries to raise the minimum wage or tries to ban plastic bags. for a party that loves to say they love small government, they are sure passing a lot of amendments and bills that take power away from small government. And I agree with you. There has to be, they black out a lot of stuff down in Harrisburg on how they spend taxpayer money. That has to change. We should know where our tax dollars are going. So I agree with you. I mean, I am right there with you, Robert, on transparency and working on ending some of this government corruption.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up preemption, by the way, too, because that is a major issue for local municipalities. We're actually looking to pass a resolution about that to let the legislators know. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, like this is over the last year, watching some of these amendments and bills that are coming out and how they're working to decrease municipal power, it's really concerning to me. All right, anybody else have any questions? Oh,
I see Glennis joined us.
Hi. So you were talking about the ash dams, and I remember when the thruway came through, it was supposed to go through there, but it didn't because they found that it was a max depth of 100 feet deep, and after the first 10 feet, it had the consistency of a milkshake. And we have 2 of these. So what do we do about them? I think it costs a lot of millions to fill it, to solidify it. But do we sue PPL? Is this a state issue? Is this a local? I mean, how do we?
I mean, you could. I mean, I directly think that there could be some sort of class action suit that Shapiro could do. I mean, I think that would be an easy way to handle it. The other thing is, a lot of these industries they might not be directly into coal anymore. They kind of shifted and moved into the natural gas, right? So that severance tax that we keep not wanting to put on this industry, even though we live in a commonwealth and they should be taxed on the resources that they're taking out of this state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every other state that has fracking has a severance tax. Pennsylvania is the only one. And I want to make this abundantly clear. I know a lot of people are very scared and are buying the rhetoric. If you tax this industry, they will leave this area. They did not leave any other state that did that. They didn't do it. So why couldn't you if you put that tax on, why couldn't you take some of that money and remedy some of these environmental problems? But again, looking at what the legislature's put out, John Gordner voted to change the definition of pollution so that frackers can dump polluted fracking water in the Susquehanna River. And I get horrified when I walk down that river to the ILQ, and I do that constantly. I love this. I love my community. My husband went for a walk. I couldn't go, obviously, because I have to do this. But watching people swim in that river, and I know how polluted it is because I did environmental science classes in that river and we took readings. You should be wearing a hazmat suit. It is full of feces. It is full of feces, everyone. Those little suds that you see collecting around the sides of the river, that's feces. That's bacteria eating feces. Does not get talked about enough. And they're just letting them dump more waste in there. Radioactive fracking water. That's what you're swimming in. That's what our fish and again, if you're a hunter, you're a fisher, that's your land. That's your water. In Pennsylvania, we have a constitutional right. Article 1, Section 27. We are one of the only states in the United States that have an environmental protection for clean air and water and protection of public lands. And your legislature is constantly taking that right away. So if you are a constitutionalist, I always hear a lot of people say our rights are being infringed on, our rights are being infringed on. They are doing that constantly down in Harrisburg. And it doesn't get talked about enough.
Well, a little bit of a lighter note. Laura and Tim are on here, and Laura had a fun question. She wants to know where your victory party will be and if she's invited.
Of course. And thank you, Laura and Tim, for the donation. I just saw that. You guys each donated. That was amazing. I appreciate that. And same thing for you, Mr. Gatsky. I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll have to figure that out, right? We're gonna have a big people party. Yeah. Because again, I'm doing this, but I'm just the face. There's Kristen. Jeff is off the site, and here he hasn't said anything, which is surprising me. My parents. There's Glynis. There's Robert. A lot of the people are on here. All behind the scenes, we're working together. We have. That's what's been amazing about this, is seeing people step up and figure out a way that we could work together and just try to help our community. Because that's what this is about. This isn't about me. This isn't about me. I'm not doing this. I'm doing this because somebody has not stepped up to run against this man since the first time he ran for Senate in 2003. Nobody has done it. And that's not democracy. You should be forced to tell people where you stand on the issues.
Glennis asked a really interesting question. She wants to know how much money is in Gordner's war chest, how much he has raised so far.
That man's been sitting on almost $250,000 for a long time. That's the median income of Pennsylvania is roughly around 60,000. So that's roughly 4 people's income in Pennsylvania is sitting in a pack. That's disgusting. That's not how elections should be run, especially a state Senate race. $250,000. You see your face, Glynis. It's disgusting. We looked at. I mean, the first thing when I walked up to Kristen, because I hadn't seen her in a long time since high school, and I was like, "Hey, I'm running for office. Do you want to help?" And I suckered her in. The first thing we did was dig into his finances and where his money is coming from. Horrifying. It's lobbying. It's pharma. It's out of state. And it's super PACs.
Mr. Gatsky has another question.
I'm wondering if you'll have a chance to debate Gordner at any time.
So we're going to work on that. We're going to work on contacting his office because we would like to have one in each county, including the part of Luzerne. I would imagine, because technically he is the highest ranking person up this year at the legislature because Scarnati is resigning, that somebody told me that PCN and stuff would want to have a debate. So I think there's going to be a little pressure from outside groups besides just myself that are going to have to make this happen. The libertarians want it to happen. League of Women Voters. I mean, if we want democracy, right? This is about democracy. People should have to hear from their elected official where they stand on issues and why they've been voting a certain way and what they're going to do to remedy some of this stuff. And these have not been answered in 17 years. Kristen, he just came to Selinsgrove. Kristen was standing by a couple and overheard them having a conversation saying, I don't know who this guy is. He has been in office for 17 years and the people in Snyder County don't know who he is. That's not democracy. That's not how this works. It's unacceptable. And that's one of the reasons I decided to do this, because you have got to tell the people, A, why have you been voting this way you have against the needs of your constituents? Why haven't you been addressing these other needs of your constituents? And why are you working for your donors and not your people? Tell me where you stand on an issue. I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. So we're gonna work on it. It has to be. It's gonna have to happen. And he can keep ignoring me because he is ignoring me, but he's going to have to face me. And if that means I have to stand, and I told Jeff this, if that means I have to go to his office and sit there with a sign and say, let democracy happen, debate me, then that's what I'll do. That's what I'll do if I have to do that.
So Amber also asked about your endorsements up until today and who you've been endorsed by.
So we've been endorsed by the Young Dems. We've been endorsed by Represent PAC. We've been endorsed by, we just got endorsed by Action Together. We are endorsed by the North Central Caucus. We just got the announcement that we got the PAFL-CIO, so we're endorsed by Labor. Am I missing anybody? This is like, they're just starting to come in because we didn't have a primary challenger. Typically, they don't, a lot of organizations don't endorse if you don't typically have a primary. So they're just starting to roll in now. So hopefully we just did the Democratic Federation of Women's one. We just submitted that. We're working on reaching out to the local chapters of unions to try to get those endorsements. But getting the labor one was huge. So.
Yeah. Also, Michelle has endorsed the agenda of We the People. We the People and PA Budget and Policy are a wonderful group. They do a lot of great research and policy white papers. They don't endorse candidates, but they allow candidates to endorse their platform. And
we also endorsed Fair
Michelle
Districts
is endorsed.
too.
Yes, and Fair Districts as well.
So Fair Districts is a organization that wants to end gerrymandering in Pennsylvania, which, again, they were just passing a bill that would gerrymander judicial districts more. And I believe the Bar Association, there was a number of law groups that were very against this. It takes power away from the people. That's what it does. And will gerrymander our districts even more. And so we endorse them that they want to see an independent organization handle redistricting and not any party, which I believe. I don't think any party should be involved in districting. Should be an independent organization. Oh, Robert, I don't know. So what are your ideal committees? Like, I'd like to be on environmental. I'd like to be on governmental policy. I mean, I'd like to get on the big ones as much as possible. You know, healthcare. I don't know. I would be happy, honestly, on any. I have a feeling as a new person, you probably just get shoved where they want to put you. But I have to think about that a little bit more, exactly which one I would want. But I'm not super picky in the top of my mind, just because I have such a strong stance on so many issues that I think wherever I was on something, I could make it work for that, whatever committee I was put on.
All right, we're coming up on 8:30. Does anybody have any other questions?
Jeff, are you there? I'm surprised you have not asked me anything yet.
This is your town hall, young lady. I got a show to do tomorrow. I get to talk for 4 hours. This is all you.
Well, ask me a question. I know you're dying.
Nope, you don't. This is your. I'm not gonna get you in trouble.
Does anybody else have anything else quick? I mean, oh, thank you, Tim. I appreciate you guys hopping on here. Again, we talked about a lot of stuff, and we're going to try to host one of these in each county. I mean, there's some serious issues in each county. Surprisingly, Snyder County is the closest to the median income, I believe, for the 27th district. I think it was like 57,000. The couple things that are concerning is the 60% of those in the manufacturing industry that are on unemployment have maxed that out. And that's horrifying and scary. And that's going to be a disaster situation if that does not get remedied. And again, we had Woodmode close about a year ago. I'm grateful that got opened, but the owner had said like he just can't afford to keep it at full capacity. So there's still a number of people that were let go there that sadly were not treated with respect. So I anything else quick before I give my final thoughts on anything? Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Amber. I really appreciate Mr. Bob Gatsky. My dad's here, Jeff, Tim, Glynis, Robert. I really appreciate you guys all jumping on. We're going to do one again next week. We're gonna try to hit every county here. And my hashtag is We Matter, because that's the whole point I'm doing this. It's about the people. It's about trying to get a people's voice down in Harrisburg that is desperately missing. Yeah, Mr. Gatsky, do you have another? Or did that just not go down? Okay, sorry, it looked like I must have not hit lower hand yet. So that's what this is about. This is what this campaign's about. It's trying to get representation and take care of these issues that are being ignored. We didn't even talk about rural broadband and the disaster that's going to be, as a lot of people. Again, another issue that I think a lot of parents would like the opportunity to not send their kids to school, possibly because of the concerns over COVID, but they don't have reliable internet to homeschool them. Another disastrous situation. And there are some companies like Drive, and I saw Service Electric is working on trying to get it expanded, but there's still a lot of areas within Snyder County that it's still not going to get to. And it's people are paying the price for that. And sometimes you have to have some government policy come in and take care of it. Like they did with electricity, expanding it to rural. That was a government program. And Jeff, can you just tell me what president was that? I'm blanking. Who did that? Are you there? I'm trying to remember who that was. I don't want to say that who it was. Do you remember, Kristen?
FDR.
It was FDR, right? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All part of the New Deal.
Yeah. So again, these are things that sometimes you need the government to help a little bit. And nobody, people don't want to hear that, but unfortunately, the reality of the situation is sometimes the government has to put in these programs because they're not being taken care of otherwise. And that's the reality of the situation. And at this point, there's going to have to be something seriously done about broadband in every county in the 27 districts especially. It's going to have to be something done. You should not. I know a family that lives out in Port Trevenant. To even talk on their cell phone, they have to go to the top of the hill. It's related. It's not just broadband service, it's cellular service too. We don't have great access to that in rural all the times either. So there's a lot of issues in Snyder County that are going to have to be dealt with. And then that's why I'm doing this. So I want to thank everybody for joining. If you are new to the campaign, you just joined tonight, you can visit me at Michelle Siegel for PASenate.com. On Twitter, it is at Senate PA. On Facebook, it's at Siegel for Senate PA, and that's the Instagram too, at Siegel for Senate PA. If you want to email me a question, it's Michelle at MichelleSiegel for PASenate.com. We also have a info type email, so info at MichelleSiegel for PASenate.com, and that can also join you to our email list, which Kristen sends out weekly, let people know what's going on. So if you're just interested, you want to find out more information, and if you just want to have a chat, please send us a message. We'll set up a time to have a phone call, and you can hear how I feel about the issues, right? Like, just because you have a preconceived notion of what you think a Democrat is, I guarantee I'm going to break those in your mind and remind people what a Democrat is We are the small business and working families party. And that's what I'm trying to remind people. So if you like what you heard tonight, we could desperately use donations to our Act Blue. Again, we are running against somebody that has $250,000 in a PAC. And he can get more like that. It's a funnel. And we're trying to run a people-powered campaign, which is the way democracy should be. That's the way this should be. So again, I thank everybody for joining, everybody that's watching on Facebook, everybody that joined here. And I look forward, what county are we doing next week? Is that?
We are still organizing that, but we will announce it shortly.
Okay, so we'll let you know what county we're doing next week. And then again, the next couple of weeks, we're going to handle each of the rest, Northumberland, Montour, Columbia, and Luzerne in the next couple of weeks so that we're hitting each one. So if you live in one of those counties, send us an email and we'll get you registered. Or if you just want to ask me a question, you can send it that way too. So again, thank you everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week at 7:30. And I have an interview on, it'll be streamed Facebook Live on Monday with the Daily Burn. You can watch that. And we have some other big events. We have a drive-in fundraiser that is going to be August 26th. We're going to be working with like a Pizza and Politics fundraiser. We also have some exciting events on Constitution Day that's coming up where we will be advocating for the Rural Bill of Rights, which is 10 things that I think that rural people have been complaining about for a long time. And we're going to be rolling that out very soon here too. So pay attention to that because all these issues, broadband, healthcare, constitutional rights, family farms, businesses, workers' issues, jobs, small businesses, it's all in these 10 things that our legislature continues to ignore. So again, thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.